Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a land where summer doesn't just whisper, it growls. The sun isn't shy here. It roars overhead like an uninvited guest that won't stop rearranging your furniture. You're in the middle of ancient Persia, wandering a landscape so dry, your footsteps puff little clouds of dust. The ground bakes, the walls shimmer, and even the stray cats look mildly offended by the heat. But here's the thing, you're not entirely doomed. Not if you know what the locals know, because somehow, impossibly, they've figured out how to build homes that breathe. Not with modern fans, not with air conditioning units taped to clay walls, but with towers. Silent, elegant mud, brick towers that coax the wind down into the rooms where people actually live and sleep. You probably wouldn't survive a single afternoon without them, to be honest. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're watching from somewhere warm, tell me your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know how many of you are trying to fall asleep in 34 bedrooms. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the plain, the dust crunches underfoot. Ahead, the horizon shimmers like someone smeared melted glass across the sky. The sun hangs low but still fierce, and even the wind feels like a hairdryer turned on medium. No trees. No shade, just beige and gold and more beige. And then, finally, like a mirage that forgot to disappear, a small settlement appears. These are the outskirts of an early Persian village. Maybe not yet the mighty empire of Xerxes and Darius, but definitely on its way. The buildings squat low, pressed into the ground like Thayer trying to hide from the heat. You spot goats, children, and what might be a very resigned-looking chicken. But what really catches your eye is the thing no one seems to be noticing, a tall, narrow structure poking out from the top of a mud brick home. It looks like a chimney, but it isn't smoking, it isn't steaming, it isn't doing anything, and yet something about it feels clever. Like it knows something you don't. This is your first Bajura wind catcher, and it's about to make your life a lot more comfortable. You shuffle closer, the air doesn't cool right away, but you feel something, some subtle shift. It's like walking from direct sunlight into the shade of a tall wall. Your sweat doesn't disappear, but it stops actively campaigning for your attention. Now here's a mainstream historical fact to anchor us. The first known use of badgers dates back over 20 years, particularly flourishing in the regions we now know as Iran. These structures were part of vernacular architecture, and not for tourists or for show, but to serve a real, sweaty purpose. They made the unbearable slightly more bearable, and they did it without a single watt of electricity. But here's the quirky bit, some early wind catchers weren't even oriented toward prevailing winds. Instead, they used thermal differences to pull air up through underground water tunnels like a breath exhaled in slow motion. It was more air persuasion than air conditioning. Historians still argue whether these early wind towers were discovered by accident, perhaps a happy mistake when someone built too high and noticed a breezer developed deliberately through observation and a deep understanding of local winds. Knowing the Persians, it was probably a bit of both. Practicality mixed with patient experimentation, and here's a little mental nugget to chew on as you adjust your imaginary tunic. It's not just about catching wind. It's about slowing it, filtering it, guiding it. Think of these towers not as funnels, but as whisperers turning the chaotic breath of the desert into a soft lullaby. You find yourself drifting toward one of the homes. The front door is low. You duck inside, and suddenly it's quiet. Not silent, but hushed, like the room itself is exhaling. The air feels cooler, not cold, not crisp, but cool enough to make you forget, just for a moment, that the rest of the world is a sun-dried apricot. A soft current brushes your cheek. You look up, there's a shaft in the ceiling. You can't see the sky, but you can feel its prison soup there, funneling down air that has somehow been trained to behave. Your host offers tea, hot of course, because nothing says surviving the heat like drinking something that increases your internal temperature. You accept it politely because you're not trying to offend anyone, and honestly, you kind of get it. The tea makes you sweat just enough to cool you more. Ancient hydration math. As you sit cross, legged on the woven floor mat, the breeze whispering overhead and the sun beginning to lower itself behind the hills, you start to understand the genius of this place. The Windcatchers aren't Adon's-Thyre part of life. Like bread ovens or stubborn donkeys, they belong. You listen as the family begins their evening routines, quiet conversations, distant clattering from the kitchen. The breeze shifts, and with it, a faint scent of mint and cumin drifts in from the garden. You lean back. The mud brick walls absorb the heat like sleepy sponges. The tower hums faintly, like a lullaby for grown-ups. You'll explore more tomorrow. How these towers were shaped, how they worked with the earth, how they even influenced empires far beyond Persia. But for now, you sit in that perfect pause between heat and dusk, listening to the wind speak a language only the walls understand. You wake not with a jolt, but with that floaty feeling that comes from sleeping in dry air and low noise, wrapped in stillness so thick it hums. Somewhere above your head, the Windcatcher breathes, gently, like it's trying not to wake you. Morning in the city of Yazd is a quiet negotiation with the sun. This isn't the chaotic sunrise of a modern metropolis. It's more of a slow, deliberate unveiling. Shadows stretch long and soft across the clay, colored walls, and the wind, if it shows up at all, arrives in slivers. You step outside into a labyrinth of narrow alleys, tall mud brick walls pressing in close on either side. The buildings here aren't trying to impress thee or trying to survive, and it turns out they are very good at it. You are in Yazd, one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world, and the capital of clever cooling. The layout isn't random, it's a strategy. Streets twist not because someone couldn't read a map, but because they follow the sun's angles. By midday, these alleyways will be shaded like snug little canyons. You trail a sleepy cat that clearly owns the neighborhood. The walls above you lean forward slightly, almost conspiratorially, offering an extra bit of shade without asking for applause. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Yazd has been a hub of Zoroastrian culture for centuries and is famous for adapting architecture to the desert's harsh climate. It became a jewel of thermal design long before anyone had a thermostat to fiddle with. Now, one of the first things you'll notice, if you are paying attention and not just looking for tea again, is that the buildings aren't randomly speckled with towers. Oh no, they are placed with intention. You pass one home with a badger so large, it looks like it could suck in a flying carpet. Another one has two slim towers like rabbit ears. Each one is aligned based on wind direction, topography, and, let's be honest, probably a little neighborhood one-upmanship. Because here's the quirky bit, badger design often reflected the owner's status. The bigger, more elaborate the tower, the more likely the homeowner had a solid stash of gold dinars, silk robes, and enough dried dates to throw a party every night of the week. Think of it like having a flashy car, but in architectural form, and with way better airflow. Historians still argue whether the towers were more status symbol than utility in some regions. Was the airflow secondary to the bragging rights? One particularly bold merchant reportedly had 5 Windcatchers on his roof and still complained about the heat. Classic, you duck into a small courtyard, another key weapon in the Persian battle against heat. Courtyards are inward, facing sanctuary screen pockets of serenity in a beige sea of sun. This one has a squat fountain in the middle, lazily burbling as if it's too tired to really commit. Around it grow a few grapevines, a fig tree, and one extremely unbothered pigeon. You notice how the courtyard acts like a thermal anchor. Cool air sinks and pools here, and with the help of the Windcatcher above, it circulates. The walls absorb the night's chill and slowly release it through the day like a sleeping giant sighing in its sleep. A young boy tiptoes past you, balancing a tray of sweet tea for the elder sitting in the shade. The breeze shifts, and for a second you catch the scent of rosewater and yesterday's bread. You sit near the fountain and listen, not to voices but to architecture itself. Everything here was built to carry air, manage light, soften temperature. Let's get a bit nerdy for a second. These towers work on a few principles. When wind hits the tower, it's funneled downward through a shaft, often passing over water channels or damp surfaces to cool further before entering the home. But even when the wind isn't blowing, temperature differences inside and outside the house can draw warm air up through the tower, like a reverse chimney. Essentially, the house is constantly exhaling its own discomfort, and this was long before Bernoulli's principles were a twinkle in a physicist's eye. You pass a domed rooftop, its curvature guiding your gaze to the sky. These domes aren't just pretty to help airflow within the home, prevent overheating, and give your eyes something calming to stare at while pretending to be productive. Like the medieval version of a screensaver, another wind catcher looms above you, this one octagonal. 8 sides, 8 chances to catch the breeze. The design seems elaborate, but it's not showy, just deeply intentional. Every angle measured, every brick baked in the same merciless sun that it now deflects. You pause beneath its shadow, letting the tower do its work. You close your eyes. The whisper of air through ancient stone sounds almost like words. Not in any language you know, but in a rhythm your body understands. Cool. Cooler, calm, a merchant walks past, balancing jars of pickled vegetables and dried limes on a wooden tray. He hums a tune older than most dynasties. You follow him into a shaded street where tower tops crowd the skyline like sleepy giants in a polite argument. There's no chaos here, no rushing. Even the heat, while omnipresent, feels, agreed upon, like everyone knows it's part of the deal. But so is the wind, so is the shade, so is the endless dance between light and brick and breeze. You step into another home, smaller this time. The wind catcher here is modestly one shaft unadorned, but the airflow is still noticeable, wrapping around your ankles like a sleepy cat. The clay walls are cool to the touch. In the corner, someone's left a small clay jug of water. You take a sip. It tastes faintly of earth, clean and grounding. You feel anchored. A child sleeps nearby, curled in a nook designed for the purpose. Just beyond, an elder fans herself slowly with a palm frond, more out of habit than necessity. The tower above hums. You leave the home quietly, back into the winding streets. The sun has crept higher. The shadows are shorter now, sharper. But the towers remain catching, guiding, cooling, silent guardians of comfort, and as you walk you start to wonder how many forgotten places solved problems we still think are new. You're beginning to understand something about ancient Persiate wastes. Just a place of grand palaces and epic poems, it was a land where climate shaped creativity. You move through another corridor of clay and time, tracing the steps of craftsmen who didn't have blueprints or energy bills, but who understood wind like a trusted friend. You pause to examine the bones of an old badger, one that time hasn't been especially kind to. Its outer plaster has chipped, revealing the mud brick beneath, baked hard by decayed, maybe centuries soft sun. It's not majestic, it's not symmetrical, but there's something beautifully functional about it, like a favorite mug with a chipped handle. Still deeply loved, still doing its job, inside the adjacent home another tower stands tall. This one is still fully intact, and someone's taken the time to paint delicate patterns along its base. Swirls of blue and faded ochre spiral like miniature breezes. These weren't just exhaust pipes, they were part of the aesthetic. Practical elegance, if you will, and here comes your mainstream historical anchor. Wind catchers weren't unique to Persia. Variants existed in Egypt, the Arabian Peninsula, and parts of India, but it was in Persia, especially in cities like Yazd, that the form was refined to an art. The Persians weren't content to merely vent hot air, they wanted to tame it. Here's a particularly lovely fact. In many cases, homes with badgers also featured a basement room called a sardaba, kind of natural refrigerator, tucked below ground, often built adjacent to a small underground canal or water storage. Warm air from above would enter through the tower, pass over the cool surfaces, and gently lower the temperature of the space. Some of these rooms were used to store food, others nap central. You descend into one such sardab. The stairs spiral downward, and with every step, the temperature drops not dramatically, but noticeably. The air thickens slightly, scented faintly with earth and something sweet and cold. Maybe it's dried fruit stored in a clay pot. Maybe it's memory. Down here it's quiet. You can still hear the sigh of the wind above, but now it's been transformed into something denser, cooler. The effect is subtle, more like standing near a bowl of ice water than being hit by a fan. But in a world where the sun reigned supreme, this was as close as you could get to air, conditioning without offending the gods. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some homes went the extra mile and lined the airflow tunnels with damp cloth or even rose petals soaked in water. It wasn't just about temperature, it was about turning heat into hospitality. Imagine walking into someone's house after a dusty journey and being greeted not just by a breeze, but by a scented breeze. Who even does that anymore? Historians still argue whether the water used in these tunnels came primarily from Qanat's subterranean aqueducts pioneered by the Persians from surface wells and seasonal storage. Either way, managing that water was an art form in itself. You couldn't just splash it around like a kid with a super soaker. You had to think, you had to plan. As you linger in the Sardab, you notice a few ceramic jars clustered in a cool corner. No labels, of course, but you'd bet a pouch of saffron they contain yogurt, pickled garlic, or some early prototype of sorbet. Ancient fridges weren't glamorous, but they worked. And besides, what more do you really need than a chilled pomegranate on a 40-degree day? Up above, a child's laughter filters down a reminder that life doesn't stop for architecture. It just happens inside of it. You climb back to the surface, blinking against the sudden brightness. The sun is now in full performance mode. Rooftops blaze, shadows cling to whatever corners they can find. But again, you feel that familiar companioned whisper of wind guided by hand and habit. It curls past your face, not cold, but intentional. Like someone opened a door to a better room, you walk now along the rooftops. This is the hidden world of Yazd Lair most travelers never see. Here, wind catchers rise like periscopes above the skyline. From this height, you can see how their placement forms a kind of choreography, each one aligned, angled, attuned. You pass one tower with remnants of latticework inside the shaft designed to break up the wind, filter dust, and keep birds from making very inconvenient nests. Another features hanging strips of cloth once dipped in water, now crisp with time. You get the sense these homes weren't just built for the wind, they were built with it. You imagine what it must have been like living in this world, no thermostats, no fans, just an understanding when to open, when to close, when to climb to the roof and adjust a panel, so your sleep would be just a little less sticky. Comfort here was dynamic, negotiated daily, and somehow that made it more satisfying. The sun catches the top of a minaret in the distance. A prayer call drifts through the heat, gentle and unhurried. A woman nearby shakes out a rug, sending dust spiraling upward. It rises for a moment, then disappears scar-eyed off, perhaps, by the very wind these towers now guide. You wonder what future architects will say about this, whether they'll study wind catchers not just as artifacts, but as blueprints. Because let's face it, climate control with zero emissions and maximum charm, it's kind of genius. And as the wind picks up, lifting a strand of hair from your forehead and sliding past your neck like a whispered compliment, you start to think, maybe, just maybe, the Persians knew what they were doing all along. You're getting used to the rhythm now, the way the city breathes, not with the mechanical sighs of engines or compressors, but through its very bones. The towers, the bricks, the quiet patience of walls that have outlived dynasties. You move through a quieter district now, where the houses lean closer together and the alleys narrow like whispers. Each building wears a slightly different shade of sun, bleached earth, and overhead, the badgers stand like chess pieces on a giant forgotten board. You begin to notice that they are not all built alike. Some have square shafts, others are round or even hexagonal. Each one tailored not by accident, but by experience. Here's your mainstream fact. The shape and size of a wind catcher's shaft affected not only how much wind it could catch, but how it manipulated the air once it entered the building. Some shafts were split internally by walls or vanes, creating multiple channels for airflow, each one precisely angled to maximize draft and minimize heat. The larger towers could even rotate in function depending on wind direction. No motors, no dials, just clever geometry and a deep understanding of nature's mood. In multi-directional badgers, at least one face would usually be aligned with prevailing summer winds. It's not just old, it's tailored climatology, and now your quirky tidbit. Some wind catchers were designed not to cool homes, but underground storage chambers for wait for itis. Yes, desert ice houses were a thing, In ancient Persia, people used a combination of nocturnal cold, shade, and these badgers to make and preserve ice in domed buildings called yakshals. Which means, yes, you could be chilling in a sand-colored oven of a city and still enjoy a bowl of shaved snow, possibly with sour cherry syrup, if the mood struck. You step into one of these ancient ice houses. The interior is domed, vast, and echoing, with a conical ceiling that somehow keeps sound suspended midair. The ground is scooped low, like a hollowed-out amphitheater, and it's easy to imagine huge blocks of ice once stacked neatly here, packed in straw. Historians still debate how widely wind catchers were used in these structures versus more passive nighttime freezing. Some argue that the towers weren't cooling mechanisms in this context, but rather ventilation features to prevent melt from accumulating as stagnant water. Still, the ingenuity of it all makes your overheated modern fridge look kind of basic. Back on the streets, a vendor pushes a cart filled with copper cups and glass jars. The drink he sells is kakshira, traditional Persian cooling beverage made with tiny brown seeds and rose water. It jiggles in the jars like sleepy lava lamps. He ladles you a portion, and as you sip it, the wind flutters again. Somewhere above, a tower sighs. You meander toward a public bathhouse, or hammam, nestled behind a small plaza. These bathhouses were essential parts of urban life in ancient Persia, not just for cleanliness, but for gossip, matchmaking, and complex grooming rituals. Inside, the air is thick and steamy, and yet, even here, the architecture finds ways to guide the heat upward and out. Small vents act like miniature wind catchers in reverserizing warmth drawn skyward through shafts lined with bricks arranged like spiral staircases. In the warm chamber, you sit on a polished stone bench. A woman next to you hums softly while rinsing her hair with water infused with lavender. In the background, the wind whispers again through high slits in the dome. Somehow, even here, breath moves. Now think about the logic. You live in a city where your kitchen, your living room, even your bathhouse are cooled by nothing more than smart design and the occasional jug of cool water. That's not just passive architecture, that's philosophy. You're starting to see the subtle difference between these wind catchers and modern solutions. Air conditioning today is loud, binary, demanding. A wind catcher, it's more of a conversation. It asks the wind what it wants to do today and then suggests a helpful path. You return to the street, now following a small boy delivering flatbread in a wide wicker tray. He navigates alleys like a falcon, turning instinctively where the breeze moves. Overhead, domes and towers cast shifting shadows, like sundials in motion. You reach another home, one of the grander ones, with 4 separate badgers on its roof. You duck inside, entering a richly tiled hall with an inner garden at the center. The breeze here is strong, and you follow it to a marble fountain where small ceramic fish bob lazily. You sit beside it. The walls are painted in faded lapis and saffron hues, and above, the wind sings its usual lullaby. You learn that some houses had channels beneath the floor, connecting multiple towers and underground reservoirs. This crisscrossing of air and water formed a natural air conditioning system that could be tuned by opening or closing certain vents or doors. It was ready for manual climate zoning. Your modern smart home has nothing on 12th century yas. Historians still argue whether this kind of intricate system was reserved only for elites, or if simpler versions were accessible to ordinary families. Written records are patchy, oral histories offer glimpses, but what's certain is that every home had some relationship with the wind. Rich or poor, everyone danced with the breeze. You lean back against a cool stone wall, letting the airflow wrap around your shoulders. No buzzing, no humming compressors, just air, water, shade, and patience. Someone offers you a slice of melon, and you eat it slowly, juice dripping down your wrist. You let it happen. The tower overhead keeps breathing. The boy with the bread returns, now balancing an extra loaf. He offers you a bite and grins. You take it, tear off a piece, and savor the dusty sweetness. The crust is warm. The wind is cool. Everything balances out. You don't need to understand the precise mathematics of airflow to appreciate what you're feeling right now. Comfort, yes, but also reverence for stone, for wind, for the idea that buildings could be gentle instead of aggressive. You close your eyes, the melon, the fountain, the hum of quiet engineering. You breathe in, the tower breathes out. It's mid-afternoon now, the kind of hour where time droops a little at the corners. You find yourself in the quieter edges of the city, where the badgers stand taller, more solitary. These aren't clustered like they are in the denser districts. They are spread out, breathing deep in open courtyards, catching whatever wind meanders by like a cat stretching in a sunbeam. You ease into a shady spot under one such tower. It belongs to an old caravanserai and ancient roadside in where merchants, traders, and travelers once stopped along the Silk Road. The bricks here are worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Above you, a four-sided wind-catcher towers, each opening facing a cardinal direction. A practical compass awaiting mouth. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Persia's badgers didn't evolve in isolation. They were part of a broader architectural response across the Islamic world to the challenge of heat. Cities like Cairo, Baghdad, and Lahore developed their own forms of wind towers. But Persia took things several steps further, integrating towers with underground water channels, qanats, domed ice houses, yakshals, and even reflective building materials to create a whole system of passive cooling. The badger was only the most visible part of a much deeper tradition, but here's something less textbooky. Some Persian poets compared wind towers to thirsty necks raised toward the heavens, begging the sky for mercy in the form of breeze. Romantic, sure, but when you've endured a summer in Yazd, you start to get it. When the air finally moves again, it feels like mercy, or at least like a polite apology from the sun. You walk around the courtyard of the caravanserai. It's quiet today. No camels, no shouting, no traders haggling over dates or dyed silk. But you can't imagine it, the clink of coins, the smell of spices from India or saffron from Khorasan, the weary relief of travelers dismounting after days on dusty roads. The wind tower here does just cool one room. It sends its breath down a central shaft into a communal resting area, where brick benches still line the walls. You sit on one. The air here is noticeably cooler, still carrying the scent of clay and cumin. You close your eyes and try to picture the last person who slept on this exact bench. A merchant with sore legs and a good story, probably. Maybe he was carrying lapis lazuli, or pomegranates, or news. The breeze swirls again, soft and inquisitive, and you remember something delightful. Some travelers in the 19th century, upon encountering these towers for the first time, thought they were religious structure, as perhaps minarets or shrines. They couldn't believe something so tall, so elegantly designed, was essentially a glorified air vent, which, let's be honest, is a bit like mistaking your ceiling fan for a cathedral. Historians still argue whether certain regional variants of the badger were designed by local artisans or commissioned by royal architects sent from larger cities like Isfahan or Shiraz. In some towns, towers seem almost ceremonial gilded, tiled, even carved with verses. In others, they are utilitarian, stubby, and silent. Function over form, or maybe just a tighter budget. You notice a second tower near below, wider, with flared corners and thick mud brick walls. It was probably meant for a storeroom, maybe dates, maybe wool. A guard might have slept beneath it, spear tucked beside his mat. These towers weren't picky. Anything that breathed deserved a breeze. A soft scuff draws your attention. An old man in loose cotton robes sweeps the courtyard. He hums tunelessly, occasionally pausing to sip water from a clay jug wrapped in damp cloth. You nod, he nods. The wind joins in with its own low hum, rustling the dry vines that hang from the edges of the colonnade. You walk again, this time into one of the side chambers. It's dark, but a narrow window filters sunlight across a carpet of stone and dust. You kneel and feel the breeze snake in through a floor ventsettle, patient, steady. The air doesn't rush like it's in a hurry. It glides like it's been doing this for 1,000 years, and sees no reason to change pace now. Now for another odd little fact. Some tower shafts were not only lined with mud brick, but embedded with shards of ceramic or even fragments of polished metal to better reflect sunlight and keep heat from seeping in. Basically ancient insulation, stylish insulation at that. You glance up the shaft, catching a glimpse of blue sky through slatted wood. A bird has built a modest nest near the topknot, uncommon, though residents were known to discourage it. Bird droppings, it turns out, are not the spice of life when you are trying to cool your porridge. The wind dips again, cool fingers brushing your forehead. It reminds you of something else. These towers didn't just cool spaces. In the right conditions, they helped filter out smoke, odors, and even mosquitoes. Some acted like chimneys during winter, venting indoor fire smoke upward while keeping windows sealed against the cold. A true four-season feature long before your thermostat learned to switch modes. Historians still debate the exact origins of the first Persian badger. Some say it was a Mesopotamian import. Others argue for a homegrown invention that took off in the Achaemenid era and spread like a meme through desert cities. What's not up for debate? They worked. They still do. In Yazd, many wind catchers are maintained and in use not as museum pieces, but as living tech. In a city where modern cooling struggles to match the elegance of passive design, that says something. Back outside, the sky begins to soften, shadows stretch, the bricks glow warmer, softer, like baked gold. You find a perch on the edge of a low wall facing west. The wind shifts, it now carries a different sense, and baked stone and distant bread. You tilt your face toward the breeze, letting it wash over you. It isn't strong, it isn't cold, but it's earned. This isn't air that's been forced through filters and ducts. This is air that is moved carefully, thoughtfully, through paths carved by people who watch the sky more than they check the news. You stay like that for a while, letting the city breathe around you, letting your heart rate fall into sync with walls that were never in a hurry. You stay on that wall for a while longer, feet swinging lazily above packed earth, the breeze threading itself gently through your hair. Around you, the city of towers has begun its soft shift into evening. Light spills at lower angles, casting the badgers in long shadows that stretch like sleepy giants across rooftops. You begin wandering again, slower this time. The heat has finally started to retreat in the buildings, those quiet brick and plaster philosophers here releasing their stored warmth like a sigh after a long day. The air feels easier now, lighter. You pass a narrow archway and find yourself in a residential lane lined with modest homes. Not every house here has a grand wind tower, but most have something, a small slit near the roofline, a short shaft, even a carefully placed window under a shaded overhang. These are the lesser cousins of the badger, shy little siblings that still do their part to keep the air moving. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Not all Persian wind systems were vertical. Many homes used Sardab's underground summer rooms, often with thick walls and vaulted ceilings. These rooms were connected to wind catchers or qanats, those deep, gravity-fed water tunnels we met earlier. Air would flow over the cool subterranean water, sink lower, and settle into these basement-level living spaces. Imagine your entire living room moved underground not for storage, but as your main chill zone, literally. Now for your quirky tidbit. Sardabs were sometimes so well insulated that residents could store cheese or meat there without ice. And in some families it became a bit of a summer ritual to move beds and dinner down below during the worst of the heat, effectively hosting family sleepovers in the cellar. Cozy, slightly damp, highly aromatic. You duck into a preserved sardab open to visitors. The ceiling arches overhead like the inside of a whale's ribcage, and small clay oil lamps still line recessed nooks along the walls. Even without artificial cooling, the space feels significantly cooler than the alley outside. You imagine reclining here on embroidered cushions, a tray of dates nearby, perhaps a few verses of Hafez recited in a low voice from the next room. Historians still argue whether these sardabs were originally a Persian invention or adapted from older Assyrian or Babylonian subterranean cooling concepts. The basic principally go lower to get cooler and unique, but the Persians certainly refined it, combining their keen understanding of airflow with architectural beauty and practicality. You re-emerge slowly, blinking against the returning light, and find yourself in front of another domed structure. He's one covered in turquoise tiles that shimmer like fish scales in the sun's last rays. It's a small mosque, and its wind catcher is integrated directly into the minaret. Not obvious, but there. You wouldn't have noticed unless you were looking. Here's something delightful. Some mosques built in desert regions incorporated badgers not just for temperature control, but also to help amplify sound. That's right, same tower that cooled the prayer hall might also carry the muezzin's call farther and more clearly across a quiet city. Function and beauty, hand in hand, You slip off your shoes and step inside the mosque courtyard. It's silent except for a faint fluttering high above. You tilt your head up and spot pigeons circling the windcatcher's rim, dipping in and out like Thayer playing a private game of tag. A soft breeze stirs your clothing. It moves past your ears with a quiet confidence, carrying the faint scent of baked earth, old books, and jasmine. It's almost enough to lull you into sitting right there on the cool tile and not moving for the rest of the evening. You notice an elderly woman lighting a small lantern near a wall niche. Her motions are unhurried, practiced. You watch as the flame takes hold, sending a golden glow upward. She glances at the wind tower, almost like checking the sky, then disappears back inside. Back in the alleyways, you pass by a cluster of children playing with a cloth ball. Their laughter echoes off the walls, bouncing in rhythm with the breeze. Overhead, the wind towers have quieted some as if they know the hardest part of the day is done. You're noticing something now. These towers don't just shape the earthy shape the mood. Their presence changes how a city lives, encourages slowness, pauses, conversations in shaded corners. Afternoon naps under thin cotton sheets, you duck into another sardab, is one part of a merchant's house. The floors are covered in faded rugs, and near the far wall, a ceramic jug rests in a shallow stone basin. You recognize it now, part of the ancient system. Air would pass over the water, picking up moisture and losing heat, before spilling into the room. A natural swamp cooler, minus the humming electricity or the need for freon. Here's a slightly unusual debate among scholars, whether Persian windcatchers were used exclusively for cooling, or if they sometimes played a ceremonial or symbolic role, especially in royal or religious structures. Some researchers point to poetic inscriptions, suggestive alignments with stars or seasonal winds, or the presence of towers on buildings where no significant cooling would have been needed. Could it be that the wind itself, invisible and vital, was considered sacred, or perhaps just worthy of architectural celebration? You let the breeze answer. It enters the sardab with a hush brushing past your neck like a gentle reminder. Don't overthink it. Just be still, just be cooled. As you lie down for a moment on a faded kilim rug, you hear nothing but the faint whistle of air above and the soft shuffle of someone sweeping a courtyard nearby. There's no rush, no demands. The towers are breathing, and so are you. You emerge once again from the shaded calm of the sardab, blinking like a mole into the evening light. The air has changed. It's cooler now, with a softness that suggests the night has begun to take charge. The rooftops glow with a pinkish hue, and somewhere a pot clangs, a door creaks, and a kettle lets out a tired sigh. You head toward the older part of the city now, where the badgers are not just surviving, they are thriving. Some look freshly maintained, replastered in earthen hues. Others are cracked, chipped, but still noble-like aging poets leaning into the wind, muttering stanzas only the sky understands. You pass one that's unusually ornate. Slim columns frame its four vents, and at the base there's a small marble plaque carved in ancient Persian script. It probably names the architect or the house's original owner, or it might just say beware of goats. It's hard to tell without a guide. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Many Persian cities had public cooling structures that used windcatcher technology like abanbars, the large domed cisterns that stored drinking water. These were often topped with multiple badgers to keep the water cold, fresh, and mosquito-free. Some abanbars could store hundreds of thousands of liters and were strategically placed across cities for communal use. Think of them as ancient refrigerated water towers. But here's something a little off the beaten scroll. In Yazd, some badgers were designed with internal spiral staircases so that workers could climb inside and clean, repair, or even rescue unlucky birds. Imagine drawing the short straw and spending your morning crawling through a dusty air shaft to chase a pigeon that refuses to leave. You approach an old abanbar now, and sure enough, 4 windcatchers rise from its domed roof like sentinels. Their silhouettes are sharp against the darkening sky. You walk the curved steps down into the cool chamber, your sandals echoing on the smooth stone. The air down here is perfect, not just cool but damp in a refreshing way, like the underside of a leaf. The chamber still smells faintly of algae and copper, though it's been dry for decades. You imagine it full, a deep, echoing reservoir of clear water drawn bucket by bucket for tea, laundry, or the thousand other tiny chores that keep life ticking. A soft breeze snakes down the shaft, cool as a silk ribbon. You sit on the edge of a stone platform and watch as the air teases the loose ends of your sleeve. Historians still argue whether the earliest aban bars were a Persian invention or borrowed from earlier irrigation systems in the Indus Valley. But most agree Persia perfected them, combining domes, ventilation, insulation, and passive cooling into one ingenious whole. The word sustainable hadn't been coined yet, but you get the feeling these builders would have smiled politely and said, "Yes, we know. Back outside, the city glows in amber and charcoal." You hear the call to prayer rise like birdsong from the nearby mosque. It's not jarring, just a soft layering of sound that settles into the bones of the city. You wander into a residential district where homes are pressed close together, sharing walls and shadows. Here, smaller badgers sprout like chimneys. Some are asymmetrical, just right to catch the prevailing wind of the season. A few are even built in pairs, working in tandem like old dance partners. A local feature you notice, many of these towers open directly into small, high-ceilinged rooms with a central basin of water beneath the vent. The water cools the incoming breeze while also collecting dust. Some of the basins are still in use, filled with rosewater and mint, adding a light perfume to the moving air. It's a small luxury that feels oddly modern, like walking into a spa that just happens to be a few centuries old. And now something truly odd. Some scholars speculate that in especially fancy households, the badgers were occasionally used to direct air over trays of fruit, both to cool them and to fill rooms with the scent of quince or orange blossom. Was it practical? Maybe not. Was it glorious? Absolutely. You peek inside one such homey museum now, but once the estate of a wealthy merchant. Its badger is majestic, tall, with wooden slats across each vent and intricate stucco work that glitters faintly in the lamplight. Inside, the breeze flows across pale blue tiles and gently ripples the surface of the water basin below. You sit again, this time in a corner cushioned by a carved wooden window. Outside, the tower hums a low, throaty exhale, the kind you make when you finally sit down after a long day. Historians still debate whether the design principles of the badger were more intuitive or scientific. Some believe that generations of builders refined the design through trial and error, guided by the feedback loop of heat and habit. Others insist there was a deep mathematical logic at play, a geometry of air, carefully calculated and faithfully passed down. The truth is probably both. Human beings are capable of remarkable things, especially when they are hot and tired. You watch as a gecko scuttles up the opposite wall, pauses, and flicks its tail before disappearing into a crevice. Somewhere below, someone is baking flatbread. The scent floats upward on the breeze like a lullaby. You could fall asleep right here, under the sigh of ancient architecture, cradled by the invisible hands of old engineering and older wind. You've wandered into the oldest quarter now, where the alleys narrow and the buildings seem to lean into one another like conspirators whispering secrets. Above, the sky is now a deep cobalt, streaked with the last pinks of twilight. The wind-catchers stand like watchful silhouettes, their dark mouths still open to the desert sky. This part of the city feels quieter, as if time itself has slowed to match the creaking pace of an old cartwheel. The bricks are sun-bleached and soft at the corners, worn down by generations of sandstorms and daily life. You pass by a wooden door so low you have to duck to peek inside, and there in the gloom is another sardab, lit by a single oil lamp. The breeze reaches even barely a whisper, but enough to stir a hanging bead curtain in the doorway. Tonight we talk about something more intimate, how badgers shaped domestic life not just for kings and architects, but for everyday folks. Here's your mainstream fact. The design of homes in wind tower cities wastes just about the towers themselves. It was about everything around them: thick mud brick walls for insulation, narrow streets to channel shade, and open courtyards that helped circulate cooled air. These features worked together like instruments in a very sleepy orchestra. The courtyard was especially important. Often built at the heart of the home, it served as the central gathering place, with doors to every room opening into it. During summer nights, Families would drag mattresses and pillows outside to sleep under the stars positioned just so to catch the breeze drawn in by the badger. Some nights, the air moved just enough to carry the scent of wet tiles, jasmine, and freshly cut melon. Here's a lovely fringe detail. In wealthier homes, the badger's cooling path was sometimes routed through a little sitting room known as a shapeston. It was often underground, filled with patterned rugs, low seating, and ornate shelves for books or perfumes. It was a room designed for conversation and dreams, where guests might sip tea and nap in the same breath. The breeze that passed through was like an invisible servant, soft-footed, silent, and always welcome. You step into a preserved shapeston open for late-night visitors. The breeze brushes past you, making the hanging glass charms on the ceiling chime faintly. You sit cross-legged on a faded cushion, your back against a wall covered in floral mosaic. You can hear laughter from a nearby courtyard, the clink of a teacup. It all feels very lived in, like someone's going to walk through the archway any moment, carrying a tray of saffron biscuits and a fan made of woven palm. Historians still argue whether wind towers were designed with gendered spaces in mind. Persian homes traditionally separated men's and women's quarters, and some scholars think certain badgers were constructed to cool specific areas where women spent the most time, rooms shielded from public view but rich in comfort and airflow. If true, it's a quiet nod to how architecture met social custom halfway. You find a corner of the courtyard and sit for a moment, watching a fig tree sway in the filtered breeze. It's amazing how much these towers could do without making a sound. No whirring motors, no buzzing fans. Just warm air rising, cool air falling, the world breathing in and out without complaint. One wall features painted tilework bluebirds on branches, tiny deer frozen mid-step, a series of geometric patterns that seem to twist if you stare long enough. Above them, a narrow vertical slit leads into the badger shaft. It looks simple, unassuming, but you know better now. You know that somewhere above, the wind is choosing its path, part science, part intuition, and making its way down to you just as it has for centuries. You explore more homes. One has a curved wind catcher with wooden fins designed to deflect high-altitude gusts. Another has tiny decorative vents with carved floral screens so that air entered quietly, filtered through a pattern of sunlight and shadow. You pause at one particularly beautiful feature, a small water channel just a hand's width across, running the length of the courtyard floor. It's fed by a canat and designed to cool the surrounding tiles. You dip your fingers in. The water is crisp and startling, like mountain snow melted just for you. And now for a historical oddity. Some ancient Persian homes were said to use small bells, hung inside the badger, that would chime softly when the wind passed through. Whether for function or poetry, no one's quite sure. Maybe it was an early wind warning system, or maybe they just liked the sound. You can't help but smile at the thought being lulled to sleep by the breeze and a few lazy notes of wind chime music. Above you, stars have begun to wink into place. The night deepens, and the towers seem taller in the moonlight, their shadows long and watchful. The city feels timeless, like it's waiting for nothing in particular, content just to be. You realize something. The badgers didn't just shape earth, they shaped how people spent their time. Where they sat, where they talked, where they chose to sleep, and who they chose to sleep beside, all dictated by the gentle tug of a breeze guided by mudbrick and intuition. The silence grows fuller, padded by distant whispers and the soft ticking of time. You rest your back against the cool stone of the courtyard wall and close your eyes for a moment. The air glides past you, familiar now, almost affectionate, like the city itself has decided to share its secret with you. You don't fight the heat. You design with it. You rise from the courtyard, brushing off your pants as the city hums softly around you. The night has settled into a gentle rhythm, footsteps muffled on sandy streets, a cat padding across rooftops, and somewhere far off, the bark of a sleepy dog. You find yourself drawn toward the marketplace, now quiet but still fragrant with memories of spices and dried fruits. Here in this place of trade and chatter, the wind towers serve a slightly different purpose. They are not just cooling homes, they are cooling commerce. Your mainstream fact for this part of the story: Persian bazaars were often covered to provide shade, but many had integrated badgers to pull cooler air through the labyrinthine alleys. This made shopping during the hottest months not just bearable, but oddly pleasant. Merchants could display their goods without fear of melting or spoiling, and shoppers could wander without becoming drenched in sweat. It's an early example of architectural climate control for public spaces. What's curious is how these towers worked in combination with water features in the bazaars. Small pools and fountains were often placed strategically to cool the incoming air further, creating microclimates of relative freshness. The moist air, drawn down and across these surfaces, dropped in temperature before wafting through the stalls. This clever pairing was a forerunner to modern evaporative cooling systems. Now for something a little quirky. In some bazaars, tiny mechanical devices powered by the wind were installed inside the badgers. These were simple wooden figures or bells that would spin or ring as the breeze flowed past. Not only did they add a charming aesthetic, but they also gave merchants a subtle indication of wind direction and strength information that could be crucial for opening or closing certain stalls, adjusting the placement of perishable goods. You stroll down one of these alleys, imagining the scene during the day. The scent of saffron, dried apricots, and fresh bread mingling in the air. The chatter of bargaining voices, the clinking of coins, the soft jingle of those wind-powered trinkets. A merchant's parrot might even be perched nearby, its feathers ruffling in the cool current from above. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of badgers in public marketplaces was a royal initiative or a gradual adoption by local communities responding to the climate. Some believe kings commissioned the grandest towers as a demonstration of wealth and power, while others suggest humble shopkeepers gradually copied the idea to improve their daily lives. The truth might lie somewhere in between. The nighttime air feels alive, carrying echoes of bustling commerce long since quieted. You can almost hear the whispers of deals struck, the laughter of children chasing one another between stalls, the soft flapping of a fabric awning in the breeze. As you walk, you notice the contrast between the stone and plaster walls, worn smooth by hands and time, and the delicate latticework on some of the badgers. These wooden grills aren't just decorativity, also filter sunlight and reduce glare during the day, adding another layer of comfort for those beneath. You pause before a particularly large tower, its 4 vents jutting skyward like ancient horns ready to call forth a cool breeze. You can feel the slight pull of air moving up the shafts even now, as if the tower is still working quietly to keep the city comfortable. And here's a small mystery for you. Some accounts mention badgers used for scent diffusion. Perfumed oils or herbs were placed inside the airflow path so that as the wind passed through, it carried delicate fragrances into homes or public spaces. Imagine walking through a marketplace cooled by wind, scented with rosewater or cardamom olfactory treat, as well as a physical relief. You take a deep breath, the imagined scents mingling with the desert night. The badgers are more than just air duck's-thigh storytellers, carriers of comfort and culture across centuries. You continue on, the city's ancient heart beating softly beneath your feet, the whispering towers above guiding your way home. The night wraps around you like a soft shawl as you leave the marketplace behind, stepping toward the outskirts where the city meets the desert. Here, the badgers take on a slightly different character, simpler, more rustic, but no less effective. The houses are smaller, the streets less crowded, and the wind has more room to dance freely. Your mainstream fact for this section: rural homes in Persian villages often featured modest wind towers built from locally sourced materials, mud brick, reeds, and wood. These towers, while not as tall or ornate as their urban cousins, still functioned remarkably well, channeling cool air down into the heart of family dwellings. Their designs varied widely, adapting to local climate nuances and available resources. One charming detail: some village wind towers were topped with small, colorful flags or fabric strips that fluttered in the breeze. These weren't just decorativity, signaled wind direction and speed to neighbors and travelers. Imagine spotting a patchwork of fluttering flags dotting a village skyline, each telling a story of the breeze's journey. You wander among these humble homes, noting the simplicity and ingenuity at play. A narrow wind tower rises from one roof, its vents angled to catch the dominant afternoon wind. The air it brings down is cool and fresh, tempered by the thick walls that keep daytime heat at bay. Inside, a woman fans herself with a woven palm frond, her eyes closed in quiet relief. Historians still debate how much influence urban architectural techniques had on rural construction. Some argue that villagers adopted and adapted Badger designs through observation and oral tradition rather than formal architectural plans. Others suggest itinerant builders or craftsmen brought knowledge between cities and countryside, blending styles along the way. You stop by a small garden adjacent to one house, where mint, basil, and marigold grow in neat rows. The garden benefits from the cool microclimate created by the wind tower, which helps the plants thrive even in the desert heat. You can almost smell the fresh herbs mingling with the evening airy, natural, fragrant gift carried on the breeze. Here's a quirky aside. In some villages, residents placed tiny clay whistles inside the badgers. As the wind passed through, these whistles emitted soft, musical notes like a lullaby for the house. Whether to soothe restless children or simply for the joy of sound, this little detail adds a touch of whimsy to the practical design. You imagine the rhythm of village life, children chasing one another through courtyards, elders sharing stories under the glow of oil lamps, and the steady hum of wind moving through towers like gentle breathing. The stars above seem to listen in, twinkling faintly as if sharing the secret of the breeze with you. The desert night is alive with quiet comfort, and you feel a peaceful connection to this ancient way of living. You take one last deep breath of the cool night air before heading back toward the city lights, the simple song of the wind towers lingering softly in your mind. The city's outline fades behind you as you step on to the open plains, where the desert night stretches vast and unbroken. Above, stars shimmer like scattered jewels, and the wind feels more pronounced, hair-free to roam without walls or towers to guide it. But just beyond the horizon lies a fascinating intersection between natural forces and human ingenuity, one where wind towers meet ancient water systems. Your mainstream fact: the Persians engineered Kanat's underground aqueducts that gently channeled mountain water to arid plains and cities. These tunnels not only provided life, giving water, but also played a subtle role in temperature regulation. The cool water running underground lowered the temperature of surrounding earth, which in turn helped cool the air entering badgers connected to these systems. Imagine, then, a wind tower drawing air over a subterranean water channel, chilling it further before it slips down into a home's living space. This marriage of air and water was a sophisticated early air conditioning system, born of necessity and perfected over centuries. A quirky historical note: some Kanat tunnels were said to have small chambers where residents could rest or escape the heat during the hottest part of the day. These underground retreats, cool and dim, were as close to modern-day basements as ancient Persia, God-quiet refuges cooled naturally by flowing water and Earth's insulation. Historians still debate the extent to which Kanat systems influenced urban design beyond water supply. Some argue that Badgers and Kanats were conceived separately and only later combined, while others believe their integration was intentional from the start. Either way, the synergy between water and wind remains a brilliant example of early environmental engineering. You picture yourself walking through a tunnel, cool moisture clinging to the walls, the faint sound of trickling water echoing softly. Outside, the desert sun blazes, but here you find relief nature and human craft intertwined. Above ground, wind towers rise like sentinels, their mouths open to catch the gentlest breezes. The air they pull down is a cocktail of desert warmth and subterranean coolness, perfect for settling into after a long day. You recall a fringe theory that some badgers were designed not just for cooling, but also to circulate fresh air in homes to reduce unpleasant odors, a kind of ancient air purifier. While evidence is scarce, it's easy to imagine that in close quarters, good airflow was more than comfort, it was a subtle necessity. The stars wheel overhead as you emerge from your imagined tunnel, the cool night air wrapping around you like a soft cloak. The desert and its ingenious people remind you that sometimes the best solutions are quietly simple: just water, wind, and a little human care. You turn back toward the city, heart light, carrying with you the memory of flowing water beneath the earth and the breeze that knows how to find you. As you make your way back toward the city, the first light of dawn begins to stretch pale fingers across the horizon. The night's cool breath lingers in the air, but soon the relentless sun will reclaim its place in the sky. Before that happens, you pause to reflect on how the wind towers weren't just practicality, were also beautiful. Your mainstream fact: many badgers were carefully decorated with colorful tiles, intricate brickwork, and elegant wooden lattice screens. These artistic flourishes were a way to celebrate the merging of function and form, turning everyday structures into expressions of cultural identity. You imagine a craftsman applying glazed blue tiles to the base of a tower, the sun glinting off each piece as he works. The patterns swirl with symbolic meaning: flowers, stars, and geometric shapes meant to protect, inspire, or simply please the eye. These towers were not just air ducts, they were landmarks, visible from afar, signaling home and shelter in the desert expanse. A charming detail, some wind towers were capped with small sculpture, stylized animals, mythical creatures, or abstract shapes that might spin or sway in the breeze. These whimsical additions added personality and charm, and perhaps even a little playful competition among neighbors. My wind tower's dragon blows the strongest breeze. You can't imagine a homeowner boasting. Historians still argue about the symbolic meanings behind some decorative motifs. Were they purely ornamental, or did they carry spiritual significance related to protection, prosperity, or the desert winds themselves? The answer is likely a mix of both, reflecting a culture that saw art and utility as intertwined. You stroll through a quiet neighborhood just waking to morning life, the towers glowing softly in the rosy light. A woman pours water from a ceramic jug into a basin, the sound blending with the soft creak of wooden shutters opening. The air still holds a whisper of night's coolness, coaxed down through the towers as it has for centuries. Here's a quirky historical aside. Some families reportedly used small mirrors or polished metals inside their badgers to reflect sunlight into dark interior rooms during winter months. This dual use of the tower for both cooling and gentle illumination shows a subtle adaptability you wouldn't expect. You pause beneath a particularly tall tower, adorned with turquoise tiles and a delicate lattice screen. The breeze brushes past your skin, carrying a faint scent of jasmine from a nearby garden. You can almost hear the stories whispered by generations who lived in these homesteads of heat and relief, of artistry and survival. The city awakens slowly around you, but the towers remain steadfast, their ancient purpose as vital as ever. They remind you that comfort is just about escaping heat, it's about creating spaces that nurture the soul. As sunlight breaks fully, you turn your steps toward the day ahead, carrying with you the calm and coolness the badgers have given through the night. The morning sun climbs higher, and the city begins to pulse with life once again. You wander back toward the heart of the urban sprawl, where the badgers continue their silent work, pulling cool air down into bustling homes and quiet rooms alike. It's easy to forget how these towers quietly shaped daily life, a gentle partner in the city's rhythm. Your mainstream fact here: in many Persian cities, houses were built around central courtyards shaded by trees and often featuring a small pool or fountain. The badgers worked in harmony with these courtyards, directing cool breezes to flow over water and greenery before entering the home, creating a soothing microclimate. Imagine stepping into such a courtyard. The scent of citrus blossoms mingles with the cool mist rising from the pool's surface. Leaves rustle softly in the breeze carried through the wind tower, and somewhere nearby, a bird chirps its morning song. The air feels fresh, inviting you to pause and savor the moment before the day's heat sets in. Now for a quirky touch, some wealthy households reportedly employed what could be called ancient air conditioners, large, ornate badgers connected to underground cisterns filled with cold water, further chilling the air before it entered the living spaces. These installations were status symbols as much as practical devices, signaling a family's wealth and ingenuity. Historians still debate whether these sophisticated cooling systems were widespread or confined to elite households. Some argue that the basic badger design was common, but advanced features were limited to palaces and wealthy merchant homes. Either way, the blending of nature and architecture was a hallmark of Persian ingenuity. You stroll through one such courtyard, imagining the daily rituals that might have taken plastia served on carved wooden trays, quiet conversations shaded by vines, and the soft sound of water as it trickled through stone channels. The wind tower above hums gently, a guardian of comfort and tranquility. You think back to earlier sections, recalling the whistles and fluttering flags. Each tower, no matter how grand or simple, had its own personality and story. They weren't just practical tools, but part of a living tradition, a shared cultural heritage flowing like the breeze they captured. As you prepare to leave the courtyard, the sunlight warms your skin, but you carry the memory of cool shadows and gentle air with you. The badgers remind you that even in the hottest places, there is always a way to find calm. The sun climbs steadily as you navigate the winding streets, where the hum of daily life grows louder. Vendors setting up stalls, children's laughter drifting from courtyards, and the occasional clatter of a cart on cobblestones. Yet even amid this bustle, the gentle presence of badgers endures, an ever-present cool breath in the warm city. Your mainstream fact here: the tallest wind towers could reach impressive heights, sometimes over 30 feet tall, to catch stronger, steadier winds higher above the cityscape. These towering structures not only enhanced airflow, but also became important landmarks, visible from afar and often serving as orientation points for locals and travelers alike. Imagine looking up from the street, spotting a slender badger stretching skyward, its vents angled carefully to capture the prevailing breeze. The tower stands proud and silent, a testament to generations of builders who understood the desert's moods and rhythms. A charming detail: in some cities, the tops of badgers were adorned with lightweight weather vanes or small spinning ornaments made of copper or brass. These delicate features would catch the wind and twirl gracefully, creating a soft, soothing sound that blended with the city's ambient noise like nature's own white noise machine. Historians still argue about the exact origins of the tallest wind tower, whether they evolved gradually from smaller designs or were inspired by other architectural traditions in the region. Some suggest influences from Mesopotamian ziggurats or Egyptian ventilation methods, while others see them as uniquely Persian innovations. You wander toward one particularly elegant tower, its surfaces decorated with blue and white tilework that glistens in the sunlight. The latticework casts patterned shadows on the walls below, a quiet dance of light and shade that shifts with the day. Here's a quirky note to keep you smiling. Some badgers included small birdhouses tucked into their upper vents. These weren't just for decoration. Sparrows and other small birds took refuge there, helping control insect populations around the home. It's a charming example of early eco-design, inviting nature to share the cool sanctuary. The city's pulse quickens as midday approaches, but beneath the towers, the air remains pleasantly cool. You imagine the comfort of resting in a shaded room, the breeze from the badger softly moving the curtains and carrying the faint scent of desert blossoms. As you step away, you take one last look up at the tall towers, feeling grateful for the quiet ingenuity that has kept generations cool, comfortable, and connected to the natural world. The afternoon light softens as you approach the edge of the city, where the desert begins its slow stretch toward the horizon. The wind shifts gently, carrying the warm scent of sand and distant wildflowers. As you prepare to close this journey, the badgers stand quietly behind you, still working, still whispering coolness into the homes and hearts of those who live beneath them. Your mainstream fact: over centuries, Persian wind towers influenced architectural styles far beyond Iran, inspiring cooling techniques in places as varied as Egypt, India, and even parts of the Arabian Peninsula. This diffusion shows the enduring legacy of these simple, elegant solutions to climate challenges. Imagine a traveler centuries ago, crossing deserts and mountains, carrying stories of badgerstall breath, catching towers that coaxed cool air from the harsh desert sun. These stories inspired builders in distant lands to adapt and reinvent the concept, blending local materials and traditions into new forms. A quirky note to leave you with: in some remote villages, families maintained small badger replicas, miniature versions crafted as toys or teaching tools for children. These tiny towers, complete with working vents, introduced young minds to the magic of harnessing wind and shade. Historians still debate the exact routes and timelines of Badger influence spreading across regions. Some suggest trade routes like the Silk Road facilitated this exchange, while others point to shared environmental needs leading to parallel innovations. Either way, the story is one of connection, creativity, and human resilience. As twilight falls, you picture yourself standing among those ancient towers once more, the cool breeze brushing your face, the desert sky unfolding its deep blue tapestry overhead. The air hums softly, a lullaby carried by the wind itself, inviting rest and reflection. Before the night fully closes, remember the simple power of nature and design working hand in hand, the quiet art of catching a breeze and turning it into comfort. It's a timeless lesson whispered by stone, tile, and air. Now let the calm settle over you as you drift towards sleep, carried gently on the wings of ancient winds. The day's warmth fades slowly now, softened by the gentle approach of night. Imagine the last light dipping beneath the desert horizon, leaving behind a quiet hush. The air cools further, wrapping you in a soft, tender embrace like the very breath of those ancient wind towers, steady and comforting. No hurry, no demands, just the slow, soothing rhythm of the breeze moving through quiet homes, the faint rustle of leaves, the distant murmur of water in a garden pool. Your body relaxes, every muscle easing as the world gently dims around you. Let the peacefulness settle deep, like a cool wave washing over warm sand. The stories of these towers, their quiet strength and grace, linger as a tender memory and invitation to rest and recharge. Close your eyes and breathe in the calm, carried on winds that have traveled centuries, bringing with them the timeless gift of comfort. Now sleep well, wrapped in the soft shadows of history's breeze.